Alright, today we're going to talk a little bit about the types of brain injuries that people can incur. Now, we've discussed some of the elements of neuroanatomy, and we've discussed some of the prophylactics that nature or God or evolution or whatever made for us to protect our big brains. But still, things can go wrong. I want to make you all very aware that almost none of this any of you will ever experience, with the exception of one of them, and I want to make very clear on that. The first type of brain injury that most people are going to experience is called a TBI. TBI stands for traumatic brain injury. A traumatic brain injury is a big garbage can term that refers to any sort of impact, any sort of injury that your brain can occur from a trauma. It could be something hitting you in the head, to shaking you really hard, to a bullet hitting your head. Any of those could be a traumatic brain injury. Almost all traumatic brain injuries occur from one source only, and that is motor vehicle accidents, MVAs. So, when you're driving, make sure that you're not drunk, and make sure, more importantly, you're not texting while driving. Traumatic brain injuries almost all come from people who are driving in cars, and they almost all are a result of people that are distracted by their phones. This is a real problem in the United States of America. We got to get a hold of it. Got to start doing the turn your phone off when you're driving, the driver's mode. Make sure you do that to save a life and save a brain injury. All right, number two, next to TBIs, number two, the issue that most people have with brain injuries has to do with internal injuries called strokes. Now, a stroke is something that lay people will say. You are not going to hear a doctor talking to another doctor and saying, oh, he had a stroke, she had a stroke, or they had strokes. They'll say cerebral vascular accident, because that's what a stroke is. Okay, the number two thing I'm going to talk to you about other than TBIs is strokes. Strokes are the general term, or colloquial, for reference to a cerebral vascular event. That's something that's going on with a problem in your brain's blood supply. So there's arteries, veins, arterioles, these tiny little connections are their arterial beds, and sometimes things can go wrong in there. Most of the time what happens is something called an ischemic stroke. Ischemic stroke is something that refers to a blockage has gone somewhere awry in the vasculature. That's the blood vessels that go through your body and bring all that fresh blood to the tissues and take all that blood that's deoxygenated away from the tissues. Now, somehow, some little piece, some little part, some little atherosclerotic tissue or something is broken off, and it's gone up into the brain, and it's caused a blockage. It's think of a freeway and think of one exit ramp getting blocked. Now, if it's a major exit ramp, that might be analogous to some major artery being blocked in your brain. If it's a minor one, you might not even notice it. In fact, a lot of people have what are called transient ischemic attacks, or TIAs. And that acronym refers to this idea where you have some focal neurological issue, but then it resolves itself over time. And some people actually have multiple TIAs, and that can sort of be a precursor to the diagnosis of vascular dementia. But again, ischemic strokes, that's when you have a blockage that comes up and blocks some area of your brain from getting oxygen. That's called a stroke, and that can be very damaging. Thankfully, nowadays we have a drug called TPA. If you get to the hospital within 30 minutes or an hour of having a stroke, and they can ascertain that you're not bleeding currently into your brain, but there's a blockage, they can give you this drug, and voila, there goes that clot. So, amazing modern medicine. Thanks all you emergency room docs who are saving people's lives and their well-being after recovery from a stroke. Another type of stroke, hemorrhagic. Hemorrhagic strokes, those are the ones where the blood vessel wall has broken down and is actually bleeding out into what's called the parenchyma. Parenchyma is the Latin term for poured in. It's the name of the brain tissue there, that sort of a generalized term for all your brain tissue. And if the imagine again the street analogy, the freeway analogy. think if all of a sudden, instead of having the big walls there on the freeway going through, it just, the wall broke down and all that traffic got diverted right into your neighborhood. Think what would happen. All these cars would just destroy houses and pile up on each other, and it would just be this absolute mess, destroying all the area around it. And that's what happens in a hemorrhagic stroke. The problem with a hemorrhagic stroke is that this is a closed system, and so as the bleeding continues to be pumped up from the heart and continues to go out, that increases the amount of blood volume in your brain, and it squishes your brain down through the point of least resistance, which is a place called your foramen magnum. That's the tiny, actually giant hole. Foramen magnum means in Latin big hole. And so the spinal cord comes out of there, and the base of your brain sits inside your skull here. And if there's pushing pressure down on the whole skull, I don't have my brain out here, but if it's pushing pressure down on it, it pushes on the part of your brain that keeps you conscious and keeps you breathing. And so hemorrhagic strokes are a real risk of people dying. All right, last up on the list. Oh, can't see it there. Let me fix it. Cancer, big C word. Cancer. People get brain cancer, and we don't really know why. There are different types of brain cancer. Some are so serious that the bet is you'll die within the next 3 months once you get diagnosed. Those are like grade 4 glioblastoma multiforms. There's other brain tumors, cancerous brain tumors, that have such a slow growth pattern that you could live your whole life and it would never be a problem. And so that's something that we need to recognize, is that there's a wide variety of brain cancers. Now, if you got diagnosed with brain cancer, you'd rightfully be terrified. It is a terrifying thing to get brain cancer. However, our treatment of brain cancers has tremendously improved over the last 20 to 30 years, and your chance of survival is much higher unless you get one of those terrible GBM4s. You don't want those. If you do get that, put your affairs in order. Again, types of brain traumas we're talking about are traumatic brain injuries, mostly through car accidents, though they can be through football or somebody hitting you in the head with a bat. Strokes, 2 types of strokes. CVAs are ischemic and hemorrhagic. Ischemic are blockage, hemorrhagic is bleeding out into the brain. And brain cancers. Brain cancers come in all shapes and sizes and seriousness. And that's it. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your basic primer in brain pathology.